I want to tell you the number before I tell you anything else, because the number is the only simple part of this story. $8,600,000. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the sale of my company officially closed. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, opened my banking app to check on a routine transfer, and typed in my password like I'd done 1,000 times before. The screen said, "Access denied." I figured it was a glitch. I reached for my phone to call the bank, and there was no signal. Not one bar. Not even the little SOS that shows up when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and I live in a regular suburb outside Denver, so that made 0 sense. I walked next door and borrowed my neighbor's phone. A bank representative picked up on the second ring, and the first thing she said to me was this: "Ma'am, I'm showing 3 outgoing wire transfers in the last 36 hours, totaling just over $8 million. I sat down right there on my neighbor's front steps. My hands went cold before my brain even caught up with what she'd said. Somebody had gotten into my life. Not just my account. My life. And it was about to get a lot closer to home than I ever could have guessed. Let me back up, because you need to understand who I was 3 days before that morning. My name is Nora Vance. I kept my last name when I got married, and that detail matters more than you'd think. 8 years ago, I started a software company called Clear Ledger, working out of a spare bedroom with a laptop and way too much coffee. 6 weeks before that Tuesday, I sold my majority stake. The money landed in an account that had only ever had my name on it, a habit an early mentor of mine talked me into years back. "Keep one thing separate," she told me. "Not because you expect anything bad. Just in case." I didn't expect anything bad either. I just trusted her enough to listen. I'd been married to my husband, Grant, for 5 years. He's an architect, and early on he made a point of staying out of his father's business. His father, Richard, runs a commercial real estate company that's been in the family for decades. His mother, Diane, calls me Nora Ashford at every single family dinner, even though she knows perfectly well I never took the name. His younger brother, Preston, is the family's self-appointed computer guy. He'd set up both of my last 2 laptops and my phone, always with some version of, "Let me just handle that. I know computers and you clearly don't." At the dinner where my sale came up, my father-in-law raised his glass and said, "That's more than this family's made in a decade, and we built something real." I laughed it off at the time. I thought he meant it as a compliment. That's who I was. 3 days before my phone went dead in my hand. I called Grant from my neighbor's phone, my voice shaking so bad I had to say it twice before he understood me. $8 million is gone, I said. The account. It's just gone. I expected him to sound as scared as I felt. Instead there was a pause, and then he said, "Okay, don't panic yet. Let me call my dad. He knows people at banks." I remember standing on that porch thinking, why would your father know anyone at my bank? That account had never had his name anywhere near it. He'd never had a reason to know a single person inside it. I didn't say that part out loud. I told myself he was in shock, grabbing for whatever felt like control. People do that. But some quiet part of me filed it away anyway, the fact that his first move wasn't to ask if I was okay, or to call the police. It was to call his father. "I'm going to the bank," I told him. "In person. Now. I'll meet you there," he said. And I remember thinking that was the right answer, even if it came about 2 seconds too late. The branch manager pulled up my account, and her face told me this was worse than a glitch before she said a word. All 3 wires had gone to the same place, a company called Bridgepoint Holdings LLC. I had never heard of it in my life. Then she told me something even stranger. My phone hadn't just lost signal overnight. My number had been ported to a brand new device, in person, at a store an hour outside my usual area, the night before the wires went out. I drove there myself. I asked to see the ID that had been used, and whatever camera footage they still had. The ID had my real name and my real birthday. The photo on it wasn't me, but it was the footage that stopped me cold. The person who'd walked in and requested that port wasn't a woman at all. It was a man, wearing a gray canvas jacket with a corduroy collar, a jacket I recognized instantly, because I bought that exact jacket as a Christmas gift the year before, for someone in my own family. The store manager looked at me carefully. Whoever did this had your license number, your birthday, the last four of your social, he said. That's not a lucky guess, ma'am. That's someone who knows you. I already knew that much. I just wasn't ready to know who yet. I drove home in silence, and my brain started doing something I didn't want it to do. It started connecting dots I'd been ignoring for months. Preston setting up my last two devices himself, always waving off any help. I know computers, you clearly don't. Richard's toast about how the sale was more money than the family had made in a decade. A strange conversation with Diane a few weeks earlier, out of nowhere, asking what would happen to the money if anything ever happened between me and Grant. At the time I'd brushed it off as an odd, nosy question. Mothers-in-law ask odd, nosy questions. And something Grant had mentioned once, almost in passing, months back, that Ashford Properties was going through a rough stretch. I hadn't asked what that meant. Staying out of each other's business was the whole deal between us, so I hadn't pried. None of it was proof. Not one piece would hold up anywhere. But it had a shape now, a shape I couldn't unsee, and I hated every inch of it. I didn't want to be right about this. I have never wanted to be wrong about anything more in my life. I picked up my neighbor's phone one more time and called the bank back to open a formal fraud case. 2 days later, I sat across from a woman named Denise Okafor, who ran fraud investigations for the bank. She had a folder in front of her and didn't waste any time. Bridgepoint Holdings LLC, she told me, had been registered exactly 3 weeks before the theft. Its registered agent was Richard Ashford. Its business address was the same address as Ashford Properties' office. She slid a printed letter across the table, a wire authorization required for the largest of the 3 transfers, carrying what looked, at a glance, like my signature. Close. Very close. But I always add a small flourish under the V in Vance, a habit from signing about 1,000 contracts over the years. It wasn't there. Sitting in that office, it stopped being fraud in the abstract. Someone in my own family had hacked their way into my life, one small piece at a time, and I finally had a name to go with it. Denise looked at me steadily. This is family, she said. Once we file this, it stops being a family problem and becomes a federal one. I need to know you're sure. I didn't hesitate. My whole life, someone in that family has told me what was mine was theirs to manage, I said. I've heard that sentence enough times now to finally know exactly what it means. She nodded, closed the folder, and told me that given the size of it, and the fact that the wires had crossed state lines, this was going to the FBI. Special Agent Marcus Chen met me a week later, in a plain little office with worse coffee than the bank's. The wire authorization letter, he told me, had been sent through an online fax-to-email service registered to Preston's personal email address. And there was something else. 4 years earlier, Preston had quietly left a tech job after getting caught accessing files outside his role. No charges filed. He just left, the quiet way these things get buried when a family wants them buried. Agent Chen told me not to contact my in-laws directly. I told him I had no plans to. Then, almost without meaning to, I told him exactly what I thought would happen when he did. My mother-in-law will cry and say she had no idea, and that she was scared of my father-in-law, I said. He'll act insulted and ask for a lawyer before he even asks what he's accused of. And my brother-in-law won't say much of anything, because he already knows exactly what he did. Agent Chen wrote something down and didn't argue with a word of it. I left that office with a strange, heavy kind of certainty. The case had a name attached to it now. 3 names, actually. And I still had to go home and tell my husband everything. I told Grant that night, sitting at our kitchen table, our dog Biscuit asleep at my feet like nothing in the world was wrong. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me of making it up. It was almost worse than that. He just started poking holes. Are you sure that's not a coincidence with the LLC address? Maybe Dad's name is just on some old paperwork. Preston's weird about computers, sure, but that doesn't mean. He kept going like that, one soft objection after another, until I finally said, Grant, My signature is forged on a document that moved $8 million into a company your father registered 3 weeks before it happened. I'm not saying you're wrong, he said quietly. I'm saying I need this to not be true. We didn't fight, not really. We just went to bed on opposite sides of something enormous, and neither of us reached across it. Lying there in the dark, I understood something I hadn't let myself think yet. I might have to do this without him. Not just the case. All of it. And that scared me more than the $8 million ever had. A few days later, my father-in-law called a family meeting. He said it like he was doing us a favor. We drove out to the house that Sunday, and I remember Grant's hands tight on the wheel the whole way. My father-in-law met us at the door like it was any other dinner. He sat us down in the living room and said he wanted to talk this through like a family, before anyone did something we couldn't undo. He called it a bridge loan. Said Bridgepoint was only ever meant to be temporary, that he'd have paid back every cent the moment his company's cash flow turned around. He asked us, told us really, to keep this out of outside hands. For the family name. 40 years of it. My mother-in-law cried right on cue, dabbing at her eyes, saying she'd had no idea any of this was even happening. But small things didn't line up. Richard gave a date for when the loan started that didn't match something Grant remembered clearly from months earlier. Diane, still playing distraught, mentioned a detail about the wire amounts she had no business knowing if she'd truly been in the dark this whole time. I watched Grant's face change in real time. "Dad," he said slowly. Whose idea was Bridgepoint? It was the first question either of us had asked all afternoon that Richard didn't have a smooth answer for. Richard's phone rang before he could even try. It was Preston, and even from across the room I could hear the panic in his voice. Agents were at the Ashford Properties office right then, searching it. Everything after that happened fast. My father-in-law's whole composure, the one he'd worn like a tailored suit his entire life, just came apart. My mother-in-law's performance turned into something real and frantic, no longer aimed at convincing anybody of anything. Grant didn't move toward his parents. He stood up, crossed the room, and took my hand. In front of both of them. It was quiet, and it was the loudest thing I'd ever seen him do. Agents showed up at the house not long after. My in-laws were taken in for questioning that same afternoon. Across town, Preston was already sitting in an interview room, his laptop and phone bagged as evidence. I had told Agent Chen, almost word for word, exactly how each of them would act once this surfaced. Sitting in that living room, watching it happen precisely the way I predicted, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something heavier, a kind of being right that I never once wanted to be right about. I learned the rest later, in pieces, from Agent Chen. Separated from each other, none of them told quite the same story. Richard said he only ever meant to borrow the money briefly, and that Preston had taken it too far on the technical side. Preston said he'd been promised a real stake in the next Ashford Properties development in exchange for the work, and that he knew exactly what he was doing when he agreed to it. My mother-in-law admitted she was the one who handed over my social security number and my mother's maiden name, pulled straight off an old family emergency contact form. She claimed she thought it was for estate planning. I don't buy that for 1 second. No estate lawyer asks for that kind of information over a kitchen table on a random Tuesday. Preston's history from 4 years earlier came back up too, entered this time as a pattern, not a one-off mistake. And underneath all of it sat the real motive. Ashford Properties had defaulted on a loan, my father-in-law needed money fast, and he decided the fastest place to find it was inside my life. They all told a slightly different story, Agent Chen told me. Every version made someone else look worse. The case took a little over a year to reach a courtroom. 14 months of waiting, mostly, broken up by phone calls from lawyers I never wanted to know by name. I turned 37 somewhere in the middle of it, and barely even noticed. The charges came down to 3 things in plain language: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, unauthorized computer access, and identity theft against a family member. My father-in-law got 9 years. Preston got 7. My mother-in-law got 4. The judge spoke directly about how deliberately they targeted someone who trusted them, someone who'd built her independence on purpose, and had it used against her. Because Denise Okafor had frozen those wires within the first 48 hours, and because of what the court ordered afterward, almost every dollar came back to me, plus interest, plus legal fees. Ashford Properties didn't survive any of it. The debt would have sunk them eventually anyway. The fraud just made sure it happened out in the open. I went to sentencing. I sat in the second row, and when my mother-in-law finally looked over at me, I didn't look away. I didn't need to say anything anymore. Somebody else was finally saying it for me. It's been almost 2 years now. Grant and I are still together. I won't pretend that year didn't change us, because it did. But it changed us the way a bad storm changes a house that was actually built right. We're still standing. Honestly, we're standing straighter than before. We bought a new house last spring. This time it's titled jointly, and that was my choice, made on purpose, the same way keeping things separate used to be my choice. Biscuit's got a bigger yard now. Some mornings I still open my banking app just to look at it. Just because I can. My accounts have real protection now, a hardware security key, callback verification on anything over a certain amount, and a trusted contact who isn't family by blood. An old business partner. Someone who's never once told me what was mine was hers to manage. If you've ever had someone in your own family treat you like a resource instead of a person, I'd really like to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Here's what I know now that I didn't know the morning my phone went dark. People will tell you exactly what they think you're worth, usually without even meaning to, long before they ever try to take it from you. Listen the first time. If this story meant something to you, hit like before you go. It really does help this channel reach the people who need to hear it. And subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because I've got more to tell. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.